Hey y'all, it's meteorologist Erica Lopez joining you on a late Tuesday to give you the latest update from the National Hurricane Center in terms of what we're talking about. Hurricane Ian, the biggest story, and of course closing in on Florida here soon. We are located in Orlando, Florida. I'm seeing in the chat a lot of you watching us from Orlando, Apopka, in our neck of the woods. So we're getting ready for the storm to arrive here. But let's start off with taking a look at what's going on the MyRadar app. And of course, meteorologist Matthew Cappucci is also joining us from Sarasota, Florida, this evening, as well as he's getting ready to be on the ground and chase the storm. And also our storm chaser, Aaron Jajak, who's out in the field. So a lot of team coverage coming to you the next several hours here. We're going to be full on team coverage as this storm is making a close impact to portions of Florida. But let's go to the MyRadar app if we have that up. Jack back there and Matt Hyland helping us out this evening. But Jack, let's go to the MyRadar app and show you what's going on with the storm system. Now, what's interesting about Hurricane Ian is it was undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle. So what this means, it's the outer walls, the inner wall and the outer walls were colliding, but this does also signify possible strengthening with the storm. And as you can see, the track takes it close to Fort Myers and between Sarasota and Fort Myers. Now, the cone of uncertainty, it may make landfall in between these areas, and this is why we're watching these two regions very closely. But as it's closing in onto the Florida West Coast, may potentially make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. That's a very strong hurricane. That's major hurricane status. So this is why this is definitely one to watch. And as well, the severe weather risk, meteorologist Matthew Cappucci will dive into that later. But let's give you the latest stats on this new update from the National Hurricane Center on this 11 p.m. hour. If you're watching us in a different time zone, we're in Eastern Daylight Time. So 11 p.m. Advisory from the National Hurricane Center has wind speeds, so sustained winds at 121 miles per hour. Category 3 storm still with 150 mile per hour gusts. So those are pretty strong gusts. Pressure keeps dropping to 952 millibars there. And of course, we got some new watches and warnings that I'll show you here in just a couple of moments. But we do have the track of the storm making landfall sometime tomorrow afternoon. And like I said, it could be anywhere between Sarasota, Florida and Fort Myers, where you guys are currently under hurricane warnings, and also hurricane warnings extended for portions of Central Florida. So that also does include Lake County, Seminole County, Orange County, Osceola County, Polk County, and of course, Hillsborough and Pinellas County, all the way down into Manatee, Sarasota County, Charlotte, and Lee County. Now, I do want to talk about some new updates in terms of where these watches and warnings, because we do have newly issued tropical storm watches that extend all the way into portions of North Florida here. So that does include areas if you're in Jacksonville, Duval County, St. Johns County, Clay County, Putnam County, and even portions just to the north of Tampa. All of these counties under tropical storm warnings. Now, what does this mean? That means tropical storm conditions will arrive in your area within 36 hours. So this is why we're giving you a quick update on what's going on there and the latest, at least in terms of advisories and new updates from the National Hurricane Center. So a lot going on here, as you can see. Very strong Hurricane Ian. Now let's go really quickly to WSI and show you satellite imagery of what the storm has been doing. You can see that eye wall replacement cycle occurring as the storm system progresses into portions of Florida, closing in here on Fort Myers as it has shifted a little bit to the east here. And again, we're seeing those wind gusts. If you're watching us earlier in the afternoon and earlier in the evening, we were seeing those really gusty winds across Key West, Florida. Key West reported a wind gust of 63 miles per hour. We were also seeing several tornado warnings earlier this evening, and even several confirmed tornadoes near Miami and to the north of those regions. So although we are watching for the potential very strong winds, another risk factor is those severe weather updates or severe thunderstorms and even possibly tornadoes, these rotating storm systems. So let's talk a little bit about the impacts and give you a quick update, because another one of those major impacts will be storm surge. And we're definitely watching this in portions of the southeast coast here of Florida, or southwest coast of Florida, including Marco Island, where you're potentially going to see 9 to 12 inches of storm surge water coming up into your area. Naples, you're in that range of above greater than 3 feet just to the inland areas, but right on the coast, greater than 9 possibly greater than 9-foot storm surge over that region. And if we head over to areas in Fort Myers, where you're seeing that waterway going into Fort Myers, in and around those regions, you're going to see greater, possibly 9 foot of storm surge there over the next, pretty much the next several hours here. Conditions will start to deteriorate if you're anywhere over these regions. This is the what we've been anticipating over these areas over the last several days. Of course, if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. I am seeing a lot of chatter on there. A lot of you watching us from Florida tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to try to give you the best information here tonight. And of course, our full team coverage later on this morning and even into the evening hours as this is making landfall. But as you can see, something else I want to point out to you is across portions there, just to the north of Tampa and into the Cedar Key, we're also expecting some storm surge greater than 3 feet and above. But also, I want to point out too, if you live anywhere along the Carolinas, Georgia, and even Jacksonville, this is where we potentially will also see some storm surge, maybe potentially up to 3 feet of storm surge or greater. And that's really closer to those coastal areas. So this is what we're also concerned, because I want to focus on exactly where the track is going to make landfall, but we can't rule out, of course, the potential impacts as it goes further up north, especially here in Central Florida, riding up into portions of the First Coast and all the way up into Georgia in the Carolinas. So that's really our concerns with this storm system here over the next several hours. So let's actually show you some rainfall totals, because not only do we have the impacts of storm surge, but rainfall. We're going to see a lot of heavy rainfall. Some of you are already feeling the first initial bouts of rain that are coming into your region. From Tampa to Orlando, you can see potential rainfall of up to 20 inches of rain. That's more than a foot of rain possible. That extends into portions of Jacksonville all the way down, or all the way up, I should say, into portions of the coastline of Georgia, and maybe even possibly extending into the Carolinas. So this is a storm system that not only will leave impacts across Florida, but as it tracks up into portions of the southeast, may potentially leave some pretty high rainfall totals in portions of Georgia. You can see even there in Atlanta highlighted here on the graphic here, maybe possibly up to 5 to 7 plus inches of rainfall, and that extends into portions of the Carolinas. So I want to make you aware of those inland impacts that may also affect these regions. And of course, we're watching this wind forecast threat of maybe potentially seeing some tropical storm force winds. So let's time it out for you guys. If you're just joining in, we want to give you the latest timing on exactly when this storm could potentially make landfall. And so timing it out just an hour ahead, you can see a lot of those tropical rain bands starting to enter, or outer bands starting to enter portions of even, let's say, Melbourne, Florida. And as we push this forward, you can see a lot of that rainfall continuing to fall over regions of Fort Myers and Tampa. But the thing that we're concerned with is, as this is closing in on the Florida West Coast, potentially between Sarasota and Fort Myers, the winds will start to increase. This is where we're going to have increase in terms of power outages. And I'll go back into the app and show you in just a couple of moments where we're already seeing our first instances of power outages. And then as we progress this forward, you can see the eye of the storm could potentially be making landfall between, let's say, 2, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, between 1 to 2 p.m. in the afternoon, maybe even 3. And as this makes landfall, so that's when the strongest winds will start to affect possibly Fort Myers. Now, this model is showing that landfall's potentially in Fort Myers here heading into tomorrow afternoon. So that's where we're going to see the highest wind gusts from this storm system. And then as this moves inland, you can see the Tampa Bay area, you're going to get a lot of that rainfall, potentially some of those strong winds. And then eventually, as it crosses into portions of Central Florida, even into the late evening hours on Wednesday, this is when we're going to see significant rainfall that's going to lead to significant flash flooding, potentially life-threatening flash flooding. And as we progress into early morning Thursday, you can see a lot of that rain starting to affect areas of Georgia, the Carolinas, and even in Jacksonville. And this is walking you through at least Thursday morning. So all of these impacts will start to affect these regions. And then eventually, I think by Friday, most of the rain starts to clear out. But of course, we're going to have to see what this storm system does with this area. And of course, let's give you a quick update on these severe weather outlooks. So heading into tomorrow, we have a severe weather risk into portions of Central Florida and all the way down into South Florida, and then even into Thursday. Now you're seeing Orlando, Port Orange, and even portions south of Jacksonville. You're under that risk of severe weather, where earlier today we had 5 reports of tornadoes in portions of South Florida. But I want to talk about what the severe weather at risk is for tomorrow with our meteorologist, Matthew Cappucci, who is in Sarasota, Florida. And he's going to give us an update and a good analysis on what his thinking is for this potential of severe weather tomorrow.
So we've talked about surge, we've talked about winds. Those are the main things near the coastline. But I think it's important, folks, to remember that even inland, far removed from the beaches, they can still suffer serious impacts from this tropical system. I want to start off talking about tornado potential because we saw at least 5 or 6 tornadoes today along Alligator Alley. So that's Interstate 75 that crosses kind of from like Immokalee and down towards Naples over in the direction of Miami. You see 1 or 2, actually 5 tornadoes there. One narrowly missed Fort Lauderdale's terminal Doppler radar at the airport. So kind of want to focus on this. We'll go over to the high-res rapid refresh model, and we can put on severe weather and show you 0 to 1 kilometer helicity, so low-level spin. All night tonight, those greens, those yellows, showing you there is some twisting at the lower levels of the atmosphere. Early tomorrow morning, if you live south of Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Caloosahatchee southwards towards Immokalee, and again the 75 corridor, don't be surprised if your phone buzzes with an early morning tornado warning somewhere in that area, because oftentimes you get tornadoes in the right front quadrant of tropical cyclones, meaning kind of the forward part of it on the right side, in this case the northeastern side of this storm, of course, Ian. Surface winds slow down markedly, but at the mid-levels those winds continue onwards, the surface winds slowing due to friction with land, and so you get kind of a change in wind speed with height. That produces an overturning circulation which can be tilted by thunderstorm or squall updrafts stretched into tornadoes. That will likely be the case early tomorrow morning. These numbers are actually decently impressive, and the other thing, by the way, too, within the eye wall itself, you might get tornado-like vortices called mini swirls, which just kind of whip up very quickly. They might be 40, 50 miles an hour in terms of their speed, but they're rotating around the eye wall itself, causing narrow localized strips of extreme irregular damage. They were discovered following Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. They could be an issue this time as well. The other thing I really want to talk about is heavy precipitation. We notice with this system, the bulk of the heaviest rainfall, obviously it's going to be heavy rainfall everywhere, but the bulk is actually off to the north or the left side of the circulation center. So that puts areas like, for example, Tampa in the crosshairs of extreme rainfall on the order of, say, 20, 25 inches. That could head over towards Orlando. Really, Interstate 4 is kind of a pretty big risk for this high-end flooding. And the Weather Prediction Center, WPC, has actually taken the rare step of issuing a high-risk 2 days in a row, a top-tier level 4 out of 4, basically saying, hey, if you're in this area, this is not your run-of-the-mill summertime thunderstorm flash flooding event. This is widespread flooding over underpasses, likely inaccessible, roadways dangerous, many of which will become virtual rivers, streets that look like swimming pools. This is going to be one of those things where I think even well inland, you could see some disastrous flooding in a few pockets, especially with rainfall rates of 2 or 3 inches plus per hour. That could be a extreme episode that folks will have to contend with. So ultimately, we got a lot more hazards to talk about, and with this latest advisory, the danger is really only growing.
Wishing you the best of luck and stay safe out there chasing Hurricane Ian. Now let's get to what's going on the MyRadar app, because I do want to show you a couple of things. We do have a tornado warning in place for portions of Brevard County this evening, and this particular storm system does have indication of strong rotation within this storm. So again, this is a tornado warning for south central Broward County. Sorry, pardon that. It's Broward County in southeastern Florida until midnight. So you still have about another 15 minutes on this tornado warning. This is a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado. It's moving at about 20 miles per hour. So if you're in this area, the tornado warning alert went off on your phone. You need to be seeking shelter. I'm seeing here on velocity a very strong indication that this storm is rotating, and it's coming into portions again of Broward County just to the west there of Miami, west to the I should say to the west northwest of Miami. But let's zoom out and give you a quick update on what's going on with Hurricane Ian as it stands currently. And of course, we do have that risk of severe weather that not only will go up throughout the rest of the day today, in the evening, and even into tomorrow and possibly into Friday as it rides up Florida's first coast there. But let's take a look at what's going on here on radar, and you can really see it on radar as this loads, how strong and how big this storm is. A lot of its tropical outer bands are starting to reach areas of Miami. So I am seeing this particular outer band stretching all the way down into South Florida. And this is no surprise that we're seeing tornado warnings within this zone, as this is a pretty strong system that's moving over this region. And of course, again, anticipating landfall anytime between early afternoon and into the late afternoon hours. But let's take a look and let's go back to WSI Jack, and let's take a look at what's going on here on high resolution satellite. As you can see, undergoing that eye wall replacement. This may be indicating that the storm is strengthening. Still a category 3 storm. We're anticipating this to strengthen into a category 4 storm. Right now it has winds of 120 miles per hour. And so, and of course, winds of up to 130, between 130 and 156 miles per hour is what it needs to become a category 4 storm. So right now, sustained winds at 120 miles per hour with Hurricane Ian closing in on the west coast of Florida, possibly making landfall between Fort Myers. But let's give you a quick update on those rainfall totals. And I am watching the chat here tonight, seeing if any of you have questions, but a lot of you joining us from Florida, even the Carolinas. If you have any questions, ask them in the chat. But a lot of you from Florida, and there were mandatory evacuations earlier yesterday and even today for areas along Tampa and south of Tampa. But as you can see, those rainfall potential totals over the next 5 days. Now, this is our biggest concern, especially if you live anywhere in central Florida. Although you may get some tropical storm force winds over this area, some of these regions may see even of upwards of hurricane strength winds over this area. So let's actually show you that, and let's see if I have this up there for you guys. But I want to show you this map. So I had this translated in Spanish earlier, but we'll go ahead and talk about it in English, because as you can see, that purple shaded area, that means we may see wind gusts or winds of up to and even more than 110 miles per hour. So that's that purple shaded area from Tampa to Sarasota to Venice, and then all the way into portions of Central Florida, including Daytona Beach and portions there of St. Johns County. We may see between 74 to 110 mile per hour wind gusts. So that's category 1 hurricane strength winds that may even reach inland areas such as Orlando. And this may even cause power outages. So actually, speaking of power outages, let's go back to the app. Jack, and earlier this evening, I was seeing a couple of customers without power in portions of portions of West Palm Beach earlier, but I'm not seeing that currently. But let's see, let's go here and check in on those power outages. But that was our first indication that some areas were losing power because of these strong and even rotating storm systems that were moving over this region. And of course, the MyRadar app, if you don't have it on your phone, maybe you're just finding us for the first time on YouTube, this is going to help you navigate the storm, as it'll send you alerts during the storm, and even when there's potentially even hurricane warnings or even tornado warnings. And if you were to lose power and you have your phone fully charged, you have all this information accessible to you throughout this storm system. So definitely recommend this, and has a lot of features that you can see on your phone, or maybe even you have an iPad like I do here, that will help you navigate the storm. So a lot of helpful features, especially if you were to lose power, and your phone or iPad is the only source that you can get your weather information. But let's take it to the MyRadar app here. And of course, we're still seeing those tornado warnings. It looks like they did extend this tornado warning for portions of Broward County here until later on this evening. So around midnight. Let's see. So right now, we're not seeing a report of a confirmed tornado, but a tornado capable located over East Toll Gate on Alligator Alley, just 12 miles northwest of Pembroke Pines, moving at 20 miles per hour. So this is where we're seeing that tornado warning again until midnight tonight. And let's take a look to see if it has any indication of rotation within this area. So it looks like not seeing so much rotation as I was seeing earlier this evening. So that's some good news. We'll have to see if they extend this warning or if any new tornado warnings pop up. That's another risk that we're going to start to see, especially with the storm system as it closes in on portions of the Florida West Coast here. So a lot of impacts that we're watching. And if you're just joining us, we're going over the potential impacts that some of you guys may feel across Florida's West Coast. But I also want to stress that some of these impacts may be even reaching out to portions of the inland location. So let's actually go there and let's talk about the rainfall totals. I do want to stress enough that you need to be taking your precautions over these regions. Flooding risks are definitely a danger heading into the next several hours. Something us meteorologists always say: turn around, don't drown, especially if you see a flooded roadway, do not drive in it. And it's better to stay safe over this area. Of course, if you're anywhere in Central Florida, and I would even say portions of the first coast, prepare for power outages and possible flooding over these areas. So let's take a look at the Futurecast radar here. And can't show this enough because I know a lot of you are concerned about the timing, exactly when this storm system or maybe the strongest storms will arrive over your area. So of course, a lot of you already starting to feel a lot of that heavy rainfall. Tampa, you haven't seen the heaviest rainfall from this yet. So although you're seeing a lot of that light rainfall, as we head into the overnight hours and eventually into the morning hours, this is when the rain will start to pick up. So this is about an hour from now at about 1:30 Eastern Daylight Time. So if you're joining us here late, thank you so much. But we're going to walk you through the storm here over the next several hours. So 3 a.m. I think is when the bulk of the heaviest rainfall will start to arrive over areas of even Key West. As you can see, some of those outer bands even showing up on future radar. Some of these may start to rotate over that area. So Key West, although you did see the brunt of the storm system, a lot of those gusty winds, some of the risk factors heading into tomorrow is that severe weather risk. Maybe I'll also see a water spout risk over these regions heading into the next several hours. And as you can see, as we progress this, push this forward into about 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, Orlando, Florida, Jacksonville, you will start to see a lot of this heavy rainfall moving into your region. Tampa, you will be in the thick of it, I would say, as early as the morning hours in terms of that rainfall and even gusty wind risk. And then as we push this forward, landfall looks to be between maybe 1 to 2. This thing slows down maybe even 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time in possibly Fort Myers or maybe even to the south of it. But looks like the core of this storm system of Hurricane Ian will be over this region between 2 and 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow. You can see a lot of that rainfall still over Orlando and portions of Florida's east coast. So this is why we have that concern of flooding rainfall. And then if we take a look forward into the evening hours, a lot of that wind will start to reach areas, let's say of Polk County there, down in Fort Myers, Hardy County, DeSoto County, and even down into Sarasota County and Manatee County. And then as we push this forward into portions of Central Florida, so this is about the 9 o'clock p.m. time frame. So those bright colors you're seeing on your screen, that just means heavy rainfall. And the redder you see it on your screen and even the darker, the heaviest, that's when the heaviest rainfall will reach over your area. So this is not going to be the exact picture that you're going to see, but this is really telling us that this is when the heaviest rainfall will arrive over these regions. And we're definitely seeing that over Polk County by 9 o'clock p.m. And then this eventually pushes into Orange County and even portions of Osceola, Seminole County as we reach that 11 p.m. hour. And then as we push this forward into Thursday, a lot of the north portion of Florida, so I'm talking about Duval County, St. Johns County, possibly Flagler and Volusia County, this is when the rainfall will start to increase for your region and maybe even those gusty winds. And then as we push this forward, you can see the storm re-emerging over water here, maybe the center of the storm, but a lot of that rainfall continuing to fall over portions of Georgia and even the Carolinas here. So we still got a long ways to go with this storm system, especially in terms of that rainfall that may even reach the Carolinas as early as Friday. So you guys stay prepared. I know you Floridians are resilient, but if you're new to Florida, we're going to be here keeping you updated all evening long and even into tomorrow morning in terms of the track of the storm and where it could potentially make landfall over the next several hours. So let's see. Let me read some of your questions if you have any. Hello to a lot of you watching us from Florida. And if you didn't know, we're actually here in Orlando, Florida. Jack, I don't know if you can pull up the camera here just to show us, just to show them where exactly we are here in Orlando, Florida. But you can see, of course, nightfall here. We were seeing a little bit of those tropical rains starting to reach this area. And if you look to the right of the screen, that is I-4 there. A couple cars there driving. But if we switch to the MyRadar East cam, so this is the first cam you're seeing on your screen is actually the south, facing south or looking south. And then this is the MyRadar East camera. You can really pick up that rainfall that's falling over this area. So this is just the beginning for us in terms of that rainfall here in Orlando, Florida. And this is downtown Orlando. Very dark sky, but you can see a couple of those clouds out there in the distance. So definitely bracing for the storm here, and of course always cautious about the amount of rainfall we may see over this region. So if you have any questions, I think I'm going to stay on for a couple more minutes asking anybody, but you know, this is really time is running out to prepare for this storm. We are here bracing for it in Orlando, Florida. Of course, expecting impacts of heavy rainfall and maybe even possibly power outages here over the next several hours. And as this thing nears the Tampa Bay and possibly even Fort Myers area. So let's take a look and put the MyRadar app full screen here, Jack, and take a quick look at what's going on radar. Not seeing any power outages. So this is what I wanted to look up here. Let's take a look. So right now it looks like we do have a couple of power outages going up here. So Palm Beach County, about 700, let's see. So yes, we have about a couple customers. So 22,000 customers without power now in portions of South Florida, on the Florida East Coast, with Miami-Dade County having some outages, Broward County, and even Palm Beach County. You know, this just tells you the power of the storm system. Although this region wasn't even under the cone of uncertainty in terms of Hurricane Ian, you can still see these impacts of severe weather and maybe even possibly these wind gusts reaching these areas. And over this area, tropical storm force winds may still even cause power outages over this region. Like I said earlier, a couple of obs were already observing 63-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Key West, Florida. And then as the storm system quickly moves up into portions of the Gulf Coast here. And earlier, actually, in the overnight, it did make landfall in Cuba as a strong hurricane category 3 storm. And earlier reports were also saying that the entire Cuban country is out without power this evening because of Hurricane Ian as it passed through this area. So definitely thinking of them tonight, as they already felt the power of this hurricane through their area. But let's take a look if we have a MyRadar up there. Thank you, Jack. Jack up there working so hard with me this late at night. But I do want to give you a quick update. Again, ask your questions. I think we're going to stay on for just a couple more minutes here tonight. But of course, if you're watching me, thank you so much. I know maybe a lot of you staying up just for the latest information on what's going on, especially with this new National Hurricane Center update at 11 p.m. And of course, they're updating every hour on the storm system and even with these track updates. But of course, closing in on the Florida West Coast there this evening. So let's see. Yeah, so somebody asking, has the projected landfall area moved farther south? Last time they checked, it was possibly between Venice and Fort Myers here. So that's something I think we should talk about a little bit, because if you haven't paid attention to the storm, maybe you're not in Florida, you really haven't been keeping track of the weather. If you watched us just 3 days ago, this track was completely different. So this is why we always stress and reiterate, it's always important to get the latest update from the National Hurricane Center, especially when it comes to these hurricane tracks, because early on in the week, these forecast models weren't really certain where exactly it can make landfall. But now that we're about a couple of hours away from landfall, we could strongly say that it will make landfall within this area. And it has pushed a little bit further southeast, especially as it made landfall earlier this morning in Cuba. It actually shifted a little bit east, and that's what we're seeing. And this is why they have shifted this track a little bit southeast, possibly making landfall in Fort Myers, maybe a little bit north of that, maybe a little bit south of that. And this is why we have the cone of uncertainty a little bit more narrow than we were seeing earlier in the week. but it could make landfall between these areas. So you may be in Fort Myers preparing for the storm, or maybe up in Sarasota, maybe in some portions of the inland locations. But yes, the track of the storm has changed quite significantly if you weren't tuning in just a couple of days ago. But this is narrowing down now since we are just hours away from landfall. And of course, some of the biggest impacts that I expect with the storm system is storm surge. We could have some dangerous, life-threatening storm surge across areas of Fort Myers. So I'm talking about Lee County, possibly Charlotte County, Sarasota, Manatee County, Pinellas County, and even Hillsborough County. These counties under these hurricane warnings and even storm surge warnings, and this is where the highest storm surge may be heading into the next several hours. And then as this tracks inland, our biggest concern will be those rainfall totals, flooding, inland flooding, and of course some of the biggest risk factors with these tropical systems, and of course Hurricane Ian, will be storm surge and inland flooding. And that also includes areas of North Florida all the way down into the southeast and portions of the Carolinas. So this is what we're watching very closely. Not only that, but the risk of winds heading into the next several hours. Some of these winds may knock down trees, may knock down power lines, and this is where we have the risk of power outages. So be prepared for that, especially if you live in portions of Central Florida. You still have time to prepare for the storm. But pretty much across portions of the Florida West Coast, this storm system will be in your neck of the woods, and you're already starting to see some of those tropical rain bands here over the next several hours. So somebody asking about portions of Georgia across Savannah, and even portions of the southeast. So great question. I always love to show the impacts of the inland locations, because I know a lot of the big focus is across Florida's west coast, and of course it should be, because this is where we're expecting the strongest winds from this storm system and even the rain. But I do also want to show those inland impacts, because that's also important, especially in terms of the rainfall risk and even possibly the severe weather risk as the storm system goes up in the coast. So let's take a look at those potential rainfall totals across portions of Central Florida, Tampa, and even Jacksonville. So these areas right now, we have forecasts projected possibly from Tampa to Orlando up to 20 inches of rainfall. That's more than a foot of rainfall, maybe even upwards of 1.5 feet of rainfall. And then as this comes up into portions of Jacksonville, you may also see some similar impacts over this area. Now, as this tracks inland, you can see areas of Savannah, Georgia, all the way down across Georgia's coastline. You also may get in on this possibly maybe 10 plus inches of rainfall over this area, maybe up to 1 foot of rainfall. So this will leave behind a lot of rainfall. And I also, the storm surge here will be a big risk factor as well. And I know because we're focusing a lot on the Florida West Coast, the storm surge impacts will be life-threatening across this area. But I also don't want you guys across Florida's first coast, down in Georgia and in the Carolinas, the storm surge risk also exists over this area. So if you're watching us from these areas, you have still time to prepare for these impacts of rain and even storm surge over this area. And as you can see, we may see maybe greater than 3 feet of storm surge over this area. So I'm talking about you guys in Savannah, along Georgia's coastline, and even across the Carolinas here. So you still have time to prepare over these areas. And of course, tune in to the latest updates from us and across the National Hurricane Center, of course, on the MyRadar app in terms of this potential storm surge, because I want to show you guys, even though we're talking about Florida's west coast, Florida's east coast, you're also under all of these risk factors in terms of storm surge, flooding, and even gusty winds that may reach your area. This is a strong storm system, so even though it'll come inland, a lot of those impacts will start to affect these inland areas. But let's talk a little bit about the timing. I'm seeing a lot of new people joining in on this late Tuesday, now Wednesday, so it's officially midnight here in Orlando, Florida, and conditions will start to deteriorate pretty quickly. So thank you so much if you're tuning in with me tonight. Thank you for joining me and accompanying me tonight on tracking Hurricane Ian. Of course, also don't forget to follow us all across our social media platforms. You can see them up there. And if you have any friends or family that speak Spanish as well, we have all of these updates as well in Spanish, so send them that information. it'll be important, could possibly save those lives if especially if you're in the path of the storm, or maybe you're more on those inland locations. This will help you navigate the storm throughout the rest of the day today and into so I guess today is now Wednesday, into your Thursday, as we are expected this to be pretty much a multi-day event, especially across the Sunshine State here. So hello to everybody who's watching us here. I'm gonna read your questions, a lot of you from Florida. Let's see. Yeah, so we are here in Orlando, Florida, expecting to see a lot of rainfall and a lot of those wind risks heading into the next several hours. So yeah, you guys stay safe if you're anywhere in Central Florida like us, and then even across portions of the Florida East Coast here. But let's talk a little bit about the severe weather risk, and we'll get another quick update with our meteorologist Matthew Cappucci here before we end this live stream. But let's take a look at the severe weather risk heading into the rest of your day today. We still have this level 2 out of 5 severe weather risk for the next several hours here. And this just means that be on alert. Although we do have the potential impacts from Hurricane Ian, we could still see these rotating thunderstorms. So that means tornadoes are very much possible. And of course, a quick spin up can cause damages across this region. So a lot of risk factors in play with these tropical systems, especially how strong Hurricane Ian is. I would definitely pay attention to the risk of tornadoes. So don't be surprised if you get a phone alert that says tornado warning over this area. And this continues into Thursday. So for Central Florida, including portions of Florida's first coast, we may also see a potential for severe weather and some of these rotating thunderstorms over these areas. And somebody asking me what's going to go on. So I'll show you. So actually, let's get a quick update from our meteorologist, Matthew Cappucci. He's in Sarasota, Florida, and he's tracking the storm system, but his concern is talking about severe weather. So let's go to Matthew, and he's going to give you a quick update on what's going on with that severe weather risk.
Hi gang, I'm MyRadar meteorologist Matthew Cappucci in Sarasota, Florida. We're roughly 24 hours away from the brunt of Ian's impact. We're anticipating a life-threatening storm surge, destructive winds, tornadoes, and extreme rainfall. Inland flooding could leave entire neighborhoods underwater, even far from the coast. Here's Ian this evening, first on satellite. You can see the high-altitude exhaust or outflow fanning away from the storm at the upper levels. It's already covering Florida. Inside the eye, the hurricane hunters found a temperature spike of 12 degrees. That's a sign of an intense storm. Hurricanes are heat engines. Here's a shot of the eye that the hurricane hunters got this evening. Now we're noticing the tendency for Ian to deviate east of what's been originally predicted. That's why the National Hurricane Center's cone has shifted south down the Gulf Coast of Florida. Meteorologists are anticipating a Wednesday evening landfall at Category 3 plus strength. That would make it a major hurricane as it hits shore. Hurricanes spin counterclockwise. That's why the strongest onshore winds will be south of where the eye makes landfall. At the coastline, winds could gust 100 to 120 miles an hour in the eye wall. South of the center, water will be pushed towards the coast. That will spell a storm surge of as much as 12 feet if a worst-case scenario is realized. Storm surge is inundation above ordinarily dry ground. If you're asked to evacuate, please do so. We always tell folks to run from the water but hide from the wind. Storm surge is very deadly. North of the eye, winds will be offshore, still destructive, especially at the coastline, but that means a much lesser surge. As a result, current trends are better for Tampa, but much worse for Port Charlotte and Fort Myers. Farther inland, winds of 50 to 75 miles an hour will be possible as far east as Orlando, and 60 to 90 mile per hour gusts within 10 miles of the coastline. Widespread power outages are likely. To the east of the center, we'll see a few tornadoes thanks to the changing winds with height associated with Ian. At least one touchdown in the Everglades already. North of the center, a flood disaster. Even if Tampa escapes the surge, 20 to 30 inches of rain will wreak havoc across the area. That flooding could stretch across the entire peninsula of Florida. No matter where in the state you are, make sure you have a plan to escape flooding, whether that be saltwater or freshwater inland. Also, have an interior room to shelter from that wind. We'll get through this together. I'm MyRadar meteorologist Matthew Cappucci.
Thank you so much, Matthew Cappucci. He's in Sarasota, Florida. And of course, we'll keep you updated on his location throughout the rest of the day today. But before I end this live stream, I want to go over the timing of the storm system. So a lot of you asking for specific locations. And I just want to say this in general, if you live anywhere from Central Florida all the way down into South Florida, and even talking about you guys from Citrus County, all the way down to Hernando, Pasco, Sumter, Marion, Lake, Seminole, Orange, Polk, Manatee, Sarasota, if you live all the way down into even South Florida, all of you guys need to be prepared for flooding risks and even wind risks, no matter what county you live in. If you live in Central Florida, if you live on the Florida West Coast, all the way down into South Florida, and even across Florida's first coast. So I'm talking about you guys in St. Johns, Putnam, Clay County, Duval, Nassau, Volusia, and even all the way down into Brevard County. If I read out your county, you're under the risk of flooding. You're under the risk of even gusty winds. And if you live, of course, on the coastal locations, you're under the risk of storm surge. So I just want to reiterate that. I know a lot of you are worried about what specific impacts. I would say just in general, if you live in Central Florida, North, South, and even to the Florida West Coast, prepare for all of these scenarios. Flooding, dangerous wind gusts, power outages are possible in those inundated locations, and of course possible trees down because of how gusty these winds are. But let's get to the timing now, and I'm going to try to read your county out. So I hope and if you know your county, will be helpful walking you through the rest of the night. So this is looking an hour ahead into the future for your Wednesday, and then you can see a lot of those rains starting to come into portions of Fort Myers, and I'm talking about you guys in Lee County, Charlotte County, Sarasota, Manatee, and even possibly just to the north, or I would say Manatee County. So this is looking forward ahead. The rain's going to start to increase, maybe a little bit of that wind, and even portions of you're in the Keys, you're going to start to see a lot of this rainfall. Now pushing this forward to around 5 a.m. If you happen to wake up early in the morning, or maybe you stayed up, that rainfall will start to increase in nature. I'm talking about those areas that I just read out in those counties, but I'm also talking about you guys in Tampa. So Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, Pasco County, the rain will start to increase. Even here in Orange County, in Orlando, Florida, where we are located, that's when the wind will start to increase. And then you can see a lot of those outer rain bands starting to reach areas of Key West. Key West, you're not out of the thick of this storm. You may potentially see some rotating storm systems, and even across Florida's east coast here. So Miami, so I'm talking about Broward County, Miami-Dade County, Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie. A lot of this area will start to see those rain bands coming into those regions. So this was looking at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. All of those same counties will start to see the rainfall increase in nature. And then as we push forward into 10 a.m. and even possibly 11 a.m., that's when the eye of the storm will start to close in. So you're going to start to feel the gustiest winds coming into portions of Fort Myers. So I'm talking about you guys in Charlotte County, Lee County, possibly even Sarasota County. This is the time that those strong winds will start to come in over that region. Even portions of Central Florida and Tampa, this is when that heavy rainfall will continue, and it'll continue for hours. So this is why we have that flooding risk over the next several hours. And look at those outer bands too. I want to point those out because although if you're in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, this is where we have that risk of severe weather, and you're definitely seeing that with those individual cells starting to pop up here on Futurecast radar. We time this out and go into the afternoon. Now, this is when we have landfall of possibly Hurricane Ian as a strong Category 4 storm, possibly between Fort Myers and maybe even Sarasota. This is our concern. You guys, if you live in this area, maybe you're a little bit inland, is where we have the concerns of storm surge over this area, and even possibly those gusty winds, hurricane strength winds, Category 4 strength winds. So Category 4 hurricane strength winds are about 130 miles per hour and upwards of to 156 miles per hour. Now the storm system is at 120 miles per hour, so that's a Category 3 storm. So we're definitely going to have to see what it happens and occurs in the overnight hours. So let's walk you through the rest of the afternoon as the storm system closes in on possibly Fort Myers or Sarasota. You can see a lot of those purples and reds. This is when we're going to see a lot of that rainfall starting to enter portions of Seminole County, Orange County, Brevard County, and even Volusia County. You can see those purples and reds showing up on screen. That's when the heaviest rainfall will occur over this area. And then as this makes landfall, if you're in Fort Myers to the north, so I'm talking about you guys in Charlotte, Sarasota, Manatee, Hardee County, DeSoto County, this is where the heaviest rainfall, pretty much you won't be able to see anything. That's how heavy the rainfall will be, and even the wind. So Power outages are going to be imminent in this time frame. So after it makes landfall, of course, coming into portions of Central Florida and even Tampa Bay. And of course, I want to reiterate, as it makes landfall, it will start to lose a little bit of its power because of the friction as it goes over land, but possibly just a little bit inland. So I'm talking about near Port Charlotte. So as it makes landfall in Lee County, as it comes over Charlotte County and possibly DeSoto, it will still be possibly, at least this is what the National Hurricane Center track has it as a Category 3 storm. Now, as it pushes inland, and it might potentially push inland in the late tomorrow night, so I'm talking about portions of Seminole, Osceola County, Orange County, it will come inland as a tropical storm. So tropical storm force winds of up to 73 miles per hour. So those are possibly sustained wind gusts possible with the storm system on top of all the rain. I do anticipate maybe some power outages over this area. So again, if I just read out your county, so Seminole, Orange, Lake, Osceola, Polk County, this is when we could potentially have the strongest of the storm move through this area, and even with gusty winds. That's late into Wednesday. And then as we head into the overnight hours for your Thursday, this is when the rain and possibly even the severe weather risks will eventually start to reach portions of Flagler, St. Johns County, Putnam County, Clay County, over these areas. And you're definitely seeing that in the overnight hours as we progress into your Thursday. Central Florida, you're still getting the bulk of the storm system heading into the overnight hours Thursday. So I think if you live anywhere in Central Florida, the most dangerous part of the storm will occur heading into overnight Thursday. And of course, if you live on the Florida West Coast, you really need to start to pay attention during the day, as early as this morning and into tomorrow afternoon. That's when the strongest part of the storm of Hurricane Ian will start to head into your area. And of course, Central Florida, I think it'll be in the overnight hours. And then early morning hours, if you live anywhere in Jacksonville and even portions of Georgia in the Carolinas, that's when the storm system will start to move over your area. And that's when the rainfall will start to increase in this region. So I'll leave you with the timing of the storm system. If you have any more questions, of course, the MyRadar team will keep you updated all across our social media platforms. And of course, we'll keep you updated on the track of the storm system as it's closing in on Florida here over the next several days. But you guys be prepared for the impacts of life-threatening flooding, life-threatening storm surge, and even those gusty winds that we're anticipating to arrive even as early as this morning. Maybe some of you are already feeling it. But with that, we'll leave you with that. Ask us questions across the chat, and of course, follow us all across the social media platforms. We're going to have live coverage starting early tomorrow morning, and our storm chasers, Aaron Jack, Matthew Cappucci, are out in the field tracking the storm for us. Myself, Mike Linden, and Dr. David will be here to give you updates in studio. And of course, if you have any Spanish-speaking friends, myself and Joseph Trujillo Falcon will also give you updates on all of our Spanish social media accounts. So make sure you're sharing that information. It's very important that it gets to those communities that speak Spanish. And I'll be seeing you here early tomorrow as we track Hurricane Ian throughout the rest of the day today.